Can I get a fuck yeah?
Let's fucking go. I love that. We're waiting for the cameras to get rolling because this is going to be this is a live podcast recording. If y'all didn't know, so don't do anything crazy or make it weird. Oh, actually, we don't have any cameras on you guys. All right, we're all good though. Right on. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Kin in Venice, California. If you've never been here before, this is a hub for conscious entrepreneurs. There's amazing events like this one. There's a co-working space upstairs and just a lot of cool stuff. So if you want to learn more about it, you can talk to Michael, Julian here, or anyone else that works here. And we welcome Paul Rice tonight. Let's give him a round of applause, please. Founder of Fair Trade USA. And my name is Sebastian Nam. Love to have you here. Paul, what was your last oh shit moment? The first thing that comes to mind when I asked your last oh shit.
It was probably last night, realizing that we didn't have books for this event. So I was boxing books in suitcases last night at midnight.
You made it happen. We got books.
Yeah, there they are. There they are.
Yeah,
Be sure to grab one, y'all.
Make sure to grab one. And Paul, you'll sign one, right?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. Love that. Paul, your journey from the highlands of Nicaragua to founding Fair Trade USA, that's a remarkable journey. What inspired the early beginnings?
I love that question.
It's a big breath.
How long is this talk? So I was raised by a single mom who grew up in a small community in Oklahoma during the Great Depression. My grandfather picked cotton, and my mama grew up in poverty, and I heard stories all my life about how hard life was for farming folk. And I always felt a sense of empathy and sympathy for the people who grow our food. And so as a college student, I felt like I needed to go work with farmers somewhere. And I was learning about international development and global poverty, and so decided, fresh out of school, to buy a one-way ticket to Nicaragua and go join the revolution and go help farmers. And I thought I'd do that for a year or two, and ended up staying for 11
wow.
years. Working way, way, way up in the highlands, in the coffee-growing regions of northern Nicaragua, with small family farmers that own, an acre of land, 2 acres of land. I'd ride dirt bikes up into communities off the grid, no electricity, and I did that for a decade, and it became my life. I was Pablo then. Actually, I'm still Pablo.
Yo también soy Pablo. Lo podemos hacer en español entonces.
Dale, pues. Pero español nicaragüense, sí.
Ahí está. My middle name is Pablo.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, so
okay.
We could do it in Spanish.
Yeah.
That's great.
Beautiful.
And so why was it that being there inspired this path into founding Fair Trade USA? I mean, we could go back as you want, or really just fast forwarding to that piece.
Yeah, so I spent a bunch of years working on projects, development projects that aim to help farmers develop their local economies and learn better agricultural skills. And those projects were funded by very well-intentioned international aid agencies, really bright people around the world developing projects and sending millions of dollars of well-intentioned aid money to alleviate poverty. And over time, I became pretty disillusioned with that top-down version of aid and development. And what I found was that communities know their own interests best. And one of the biggest challenges for the communities that I was working with is that they didn't know how to navigate the market, and our projects didn't teach them that. So in the summer of 1990, I heard about these crazy people who called themselves fair traders. And their slogan was trade, not aid. And their philosophy was farmers don't need our charity. They just need a fair price for their harvest. They just need a fair return for all their hard work. And that resonated with me. I'd never met a farmer that wanted a handout. So trade, not aid felt right on. And so I organized the first fair trade co-op in Nicaragua that summer, 24 brave souls, coffee farmers, who delivered roughly 20 sacks of coffee each on consignment, because I had no cash, but I had this buyer, this fair trade buyer in Boston, a company called Equal Exchange, one of the first fair trade companies in the U.S.
So this all started with coffee first, yeah?
Coffee was the first. And we exported one container of coffee, and a couple of months later got the money back. They paid us $1 a pound for our coffee at a time when the local middlemen were paying 10 cents per pound. Wow. We got $1 a pound. So for 2,000 pounds times 10 cents, our farmers would have received roughly $200 total cash income for the year.
Wow.
Not even $1 a day. And through fair trade, $1 a pound, $2,000 each. None of them had ever seen that much money before. And so, I was a really popular boy that year.
Yeah, I bet.
I became Pablo $1. And that was my mantra, like deliver to the co-op and we'll get you $1 a pound. Pablo $1. It kind of rolls off the tongue, right?
I'm definitely calling you that forever.
Right on.
I love it.
So that was kind of like the spark that lit the prairie fire. Over the next couple of years, we organized 3,000 families across all of northern Nicaragua who came together to create the economies of scale necessary to build a real export enterprise. And so we pooled our coffee, we processed it, we trucked it to the port, we exported direct, and by virtue of this fair trade price that we were getting, we were able to do extraordinary things like help farmers stay on the land so that they wouldn't have to immigrate north in search of livelihood. Help farmers keep their kids in school. We dug wells and brought clean drinking water into communities for the first time. We created scholarship programs so that kids could stay in school through high school and college. We ran healthcare programs. We created a micro-lending program for women in the community who wanted to develop their own source of income and their own businesses. We reforested hillsides that had been deforested by transnational lumber companies a generation earlier. We did all of this cool stuff in terms of social and environmental development, and none of it thanks to anyone's charity. None of it thanks to any well-intentioned aid agency or government agency. It was simply thanks to this simple idea of a fair price for a great product. And so you can imagine the impact on those farmers in terms of self-confidence and pride and dignity and hope, because no one was doing it for them. They were developing their community on their own. And so that, for me, what some people call empowerment, that was like the revolutionary essence of this early fair trade journey for me, was helping communities become architects of their own future. And after 4 years of doing that, my perspective on capitalism changed completely. At that point, up until that point, I thought capitalism was the problem and it needed to be burned down. And, I went to Nicaragua in search of some kind of socialist utopia, which never materialized. But through this experience, leading this co-op for 4 years, I realized that it is possible to harness the power of the market to support poor people on a journey out of poverty. And that became my life's quest.
I love that.
That's
That
why
is
I'm
so
here.
powerful. Can we give up a hand for that? That is so inspiring. That is incredible. Absolutely, Paul. Very cool. Trade, not aid. Love that. And just out of curiosity, so why was that even possible? Like I'm thinking about the 10 cents to the dollar kind of big jump from that initial deal that you did. Is it just skipping a ton of middlemen? What's going on? Is that what it is? Yeah.
It's basically skipping middlemen and adding value, right? Because we didn't deliver raw coffee cherries to the middleman at the farm gate, right? We took it to mill, we dried it, we processed it, we sold a more value-add product, and we jumped over middlemen.
Got it. So what lessons did you take from these initial 4 years that went into the principles upon founding Fair Trade USA? Was it everything that you learned there, then from there you took these principles and then created it? How did that form what is now to be Fair Trade USA, or what it was then, at least when it first started?
So in the U.S. at that time, there were a couple of companies that were kind of pioneers of fair trade and who practiced the principles of fair trade, but without being certified. In Europe, on the other hand, the fair trade movement is 10 years ahead. They had already developed a standard that kind of codified what it means to be fair trade, the criteria that you have to meet in order to be certified. And they developed a certification. So Europe was already up and running and had a way to mainstream the movement, right? With a standard and then an audit and certification process that any company could get involved in. And so they were already starting to work with mainstream retailers. And so I sold coffee to mainstream retailers in Europe that were buying on fair trade terms. And so the U.S. didn't have anything like that. And so I came back in 94 to replicate that model in the U.S. So I didn't invent fair trade, and I didn't invent fair trade certification. My quest was to take what Europe did and adapt it and innovate it and bring it to the U.S.
Love it.
Funny. That's what Fair Trade USA does.
Got it. Yeah. Europe is always ahead of us on this stuff.
In many ways, yeah.
What about in terms of pivotal moments where it started to truly expand? How did that start happening in the U.S.?
Okay. So first of all, let me just explain. Fair Trade USA, which is the organization I started 26 years ago and led for 26 years. Just step down. Can I get a fuck yeah for that?
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
I had a question planned for you.
Yeah, okay. So it's a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to improve lives and protect the environment, and we do that through this market-based model of fair trade certification. So the organization's mission, number one, or its work, number one, is to develop the standard for fair trade, right? So fair trade is a philosophy, but it's also like a standard, like organics, right? To get organic certified, you have to meet a standard. You get audited every year, and then if you pass, you get to wear the organic label on your product. Fair trade is the same. We have a 200-point checklist of social, environmental, and labor criteria that farms and factories meet, and when they meet that, and they're audited every year, and if they can show that they met that criteria, then they get certified for 1 year, and they get to use the fair trade label on their product. And the brand partners that we work with...
Do they have to hit all 200 points?
No, 200.
Out of
no,
the 200?
No, they don't. So there are minimum criteria. Great question. There are minimum zero tolerance criteria. No slave labor, no child labor,
right.
Like the basics.
Yeah.
And then there are progress criteria, which they get scored on, and every year they're expected to improve their score and to make progress. Sustainability is a journey.
Yeah.
So that binary pass-fail approach doesn't really work if you want to provide an incentive for farmers and factory owners to do better over time. So that's the approach.
Great. Yeah.
Okay, so Fair Trade USA develops a standard, audits and certifies the producers against that, and then finally we enlist the market. Companies, everyone from Walmart to Whole Foods, Patagonia to PepsiCo, I love alliteration, they pay a premium. That's the secret sauce. That's the unique selling point of fair trade. We're not asking farmers and factory owners to be sustainable and you figure out how to cover the cost. We're saying that if you're more sustainable, the market will reward you. And that ends up being, last year alone, that impact premium paid by companies here in the U.S. back to fair trade farms and factories, it was over $100 million.
Wow.
So that's what's driving these incredible outcomes in communities around the world.
What's up, guys? I hope you're enjoying the show. If you love the show, please share it with a homie. It would mean the world to me. Also want to let you know that you can check out sebastiannahm.com for more resources like this, and also www.goglobal.agency, a digital marketing agency that's end-to-end, helping purpose-driven and mission-driven brands scale their impact Again, that's goglobal.agency or sebastiannam.com. Please hit me up straight up on Instagram, DM me, ask me questions. I'd love to connect with you and see what you thought about this episode or other episodes and what you want to hear more of. Much love. So these companies are they paying a larger premium if they're larger scale corporations? Is there a scale on that?
No, the premium is set as a certain number of pennies per pound. So with coffee, it's 20 cents a pound. With bananas, it's 2 cents a pound, and it's the same whether you're Whole Foods or Walmart or anyone else.
Yeah. And so as it starts expanding and larger scale corporations become hungry for these sort of better for you labels and things like that, how do you maintain the efficacy of the standards of what it truly means to be fair trade for companies that are just hungry for that stamp?
Yeah. That's a great question. And now we're getting into the shit, right? Like, I love this. And I hope you all read my book, because there's a whole chapter on greenwashing and on the moral hazard, if you will, of mainstreaming. Yeah. And it's something that I've been grappling with for the last 26 years, right? Like, how do you stay true to your mission? How do you maintain a standard with the utmost integrity and impact? And go big. I mean, what the hell, y'all? What's the point unless we can go big? There are 2 billion people in the world today living on $2 a day. Let me say that again. 2 billion people surviving on $2 a day. Why would we want to stay small? Right? Like, I want to work with Walmart. Eyes wide open.
Right. Without
succumbing to any pressure of watering down standards, without allowing any kind of overclaiming or greenwashing or image washing. But I want to change the world, right? We want to change the world, right? So of course, there's an invitation and a curiosity. How do you go into the market and deal with the market as it is and bring it on a journey? And that's led us to work with mainstream companies. And it doesn't always work, and sometimes they withdraw. You'll read in chapter 1 about Starbucks. Starbucks joined our cause for a while, and then they withdrew. And it's not a straight line, but
they withdrew on their own.
They withdrew on their own and developed their own in-house program. Right. There's a lot of self-certification out there. Companies that want to do their own thing, and sometimes it's because of a lack of an appetite for third-party scrutiny. Sometimes it's because they want more control or they want lower cost relative to fair trade. I celebrate all forms of ethical sourcing, and fair trade is one expression of that. But there are a lot of different models and approaches, including companies like Starbucks saying, hey, we're going to develop our own in-house program and we're going to do it on our own. It's called Cafe Practices. I write about it in the book. And guess what? They're being sued by the American Consumer Union right now for claiming that all of their coffee is ethically sourced when they found child labor on many farms that supply to Starbucks.
Really?
And I don't think Starbucks, knowingly did that. But the problem when you try as a company, try and do it on your own, is that you don't have that independent oversight of your farms or your suppliers. And so I'm eager to see how the story unfolds for them.
Absolutely. Do you think greenwashing is at its highest right now than it's ever been, or do you think that it's maybe starting to come down a bit because of consumers being more educated than before?
I can tell you in the fair trade world, we have a tight control on and a contractual stipulation that allows us to approve all advertising and signage that the companies that we work with have with regard to fair trade. So we get to approve how they talk about their program. And what's interesting is that we've actually almost never had a company that overclaimed, because I think I think they're gun shy of being outed for being inauthentic. Like Gen Z and millennials are super, super vigilant around authenticity.
Absolutely.
And companies that bullshit get punished for it. And so I think there's I'll give you an example. Peet's Coffee, y'all know Peet's Coffee. That was one of my first deals. I think I signed Pete's in 2000, and they started with one SKU, one coffee. So it was like they had their hazelnut and their organic and their decaf and their fair trade. It was just a flavor, just one. It was like 4% of their total volume. Fast forward 20 plus years, they're still only doing one.
Really?
So you could say, well, what the fuck? Like, is that greenwashing? Is that like, why would we allow them to do only one? And why would they only do one? And I can't answer the second question. It feels like a missed opportunity to me. But for me, Pete's doing one fair trade coffee all these years isn't greenwashing because they don't talk about it. Go into a Pete's. You will not see fair trade anywhere on the wall or
That's what I was going to ask you. So what are they able to do with the fair trade logo or stamp in that case?
I mean,
just
it's on the one product.
It's on that one product.
But they're not using it to clean their image. So for me, greenwashing is when you basically claim that you're doing more than you actually are.
Right.
They're doing one fair trade coffee. It helps 2 co-ops. I celebrate that. We debated, should we kick them out? They never really upped their game. But it's like...
It's better than nothing.
Yeah, it's better than nothing.
But it
and
also
maybe
makes
someday they'll come around.
Makes you think what's going on with all the other coffees. Interesting.
I like that question. Write the CEO and ask it.
So in 2011, Fair Trade USA resigned from the Fair Trade Labeling Organization, and that brought some criticism and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about that whole situation, why you guys chose to do that?
So the organization you're referring to, Fair Trade Labeling Organization, which now calls itself Fair Trade International, they are the European-based international fair trade group, and they have members in Switzerland and Germany and Holland and around the world. It's mostly European focused. We were a member of it for our first 13 years. I was elected to their board of directors. It was basically a single global fair trade umbrella group. And their focus is on small family farmers who have organized into co-ops, which is where I come from. I mean, those are my peeps. So I was totally down for that focus when we launched in 1998, when we launched Fair Trade USA. But over the years, what we encountered was a growing appetite on the part of the U.S. Industry, the companies that we work with, to see an expansion of the fair trade model to include not just small family farmers and co-ops, but farmers that aren't in co-ops, and large farms, and factories, apparel, and farms in the U.S., and things that were kind of out of scope for the European model. And then, we started to hear stories of, the plight of farm workers on larger farms. And what we realized was that farm workers on large farms are often the poorest of the poor. I mean, small farmers with 1 acre, they're poor, but at least they have their own land. A farm worker working for $3 a day on a big estate doesn't have land. So we began to realize the moral hazard and the mission calling of working with farm workers on big farms, right? Not just the smallholder, but the big farms and their workers. And so it became clear to us, and in coffee brands typically don't source coffee beans based on farm size. It's not like they buy only from small farms or only from big farms. They buy based on quality. They buy based on the flavor profile. And so we had company after company coming to us saying, what the hell, y'all, like certify all of our supply chain, not just the 10% that we source from co-ops. So it was clear that there was both a mission reason and a market reason for us to expand the model. The Europeans didn't want to expand the model, so we stepped out. We resigned our membership in 2011 and declared fair trade for all.
Got it.
And since then, we've been doing shit that, as my daughter would say, is hella cool, right? Like, we've done seafood, we've done dairy, we've done apparel, we've started certified farms in the U.S. Like, we've done all this stuff because we're not part of the European model. So the way I talk about
expanded beyond coffee, essentially.
Exactly. Well, and expanded beyond small farmers.
Small farmers.
So we love what Europe does, and we want to do more. It's the simplest way to describe it.
There's a way of going bigger, just playing big. Love that. Very cool. Paul, you wrote Every Purchase Matters, which is right here. As you said, there's a book for everyone here that you will sign. Congratulations, by the way, on that. Yeah, you just published it. On the book, you emphasize the role of conscious capitalism. I'm, by the way, the president of Conscious Capitalism in Los Angeles, so I'm it's very near and dear to me. How do you define the concept, and how important do you feel it is to today's global economy? Just the concept of conscious capitalism, period. Yeah. Or in your book.
So by the way, the book's a bestseller, bro. You got to share that.
Bestseller. Let's fucking go.
Yeah. The first week on the market, we beat Green Eggs and Ham.
That is awesome.
Green Eggs and Ham is my favorite book of all time.
That's awesome.
We were number 5. Green Eggs and Ham was 28. I'm very proud of that fact.
That is epic. That is epic.
Okay, conscious capitalism. So either that's putting lipstick on a pig, as my mama would say, or it's a really juicy idea that speaks to the evolution of society and business. And I think it's the latter. You know, when I got involved in the fair trade movement in 1990, 35 years ago, the companies that we were talking to, for the most part, didn't care about the supply chain and the people in it. And, you know, really relied on plausible deniability about bad practices in their supply chains, and didn't see supply chains as worth investment or care. Fast forward to today, I would argue that supply chains, especially since COVID, with so much supply chain disruption, supply chains are top of mind for most business leaders. And consumers are demanding more sustainable products, and so supply chain sustainability is a way to meet consumer demand. It's a way to make the business more secure and reliable. And of course, it's the way to do the right thing. And so that expression of conscious capitalism in the world of supply chains and sourcing is clearly evolving. Conscious capitalism is a bigger idea than that. It's the notion that business can be a force for good in the world. And I would argue, hell yeah, business can and must be a force for good in the world. I mean, the problems that we're facing, climate change and global poverty and all the things, you know, these are not problems that are going to be solved just by governments and NGOs alone, right? The business community and we the people, the consumer, have a critical role to play in these. And so, for me, conscious capitalism is both an evolution of the business community toward more sustainable models of business, and it's also a call to action for us in how we purchase, how we consume.
If I think back about what you were sharing initially, just realizing that these farmers getting aid wasn't it, and it had to be a market solution, right? And so when it comes to conscious consumerism, which is what your book is all about. Actually, I want to ask you first. You said that in 2020 there was a big shift around supply chains. What were the main things that were happening in 2020 that caused everybody to start thinking about supply chains so much more?
Well, with COVID, we saw a huge disruption of supply chains. Producers not being able to deliver, containers not being available, like all the things, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but my local Safeway didn't have toilet paper for a month, right? Like, that shit happened. And I think it was a wake-up call to the industry. Yeah, pun intended. It was...
I had to throw that one in.
Well done. It was a wake-up call to the industry that you couldn't always rely on producers to be able to deliver on time and at the right quality and price for whatever reason. And so I think that, I see in the industry a lot of people talking about future-proofing their supply chain. And I think what they're saying is, how do you reduce the risk implicit in the variability of supply chain practices and the variability of a coffee farmer in Colombia to be able to produce the right quality and the right quantity and deliver on time and, have a shipping container there at the port on time. Companies, even now, even after we're over the hump of COVID, companies that I work with regularly report having issues like stocking their shelves with products. And so it just reinforces the value of things like fair trade that do two things. They make supply chains more transparent and traceable, so that Whole Foods knows where the banana is coming from, not just buying from a distributor, so it knows where that banana producer is, so that it then can make sure that that banana producer is rewarded and supported, right? So a more direct supply chain typically leads to a longer-term relationship that's supporting the producer, and what Whole Foods gets in return is reliable delivery of bananas.
So before this, these Whole Foods, they didn't know where the banana comes from, for example.
They might or might not have. They didn't on all products, right? And that I'm not picking on Whole Foods. I mean, that was the norm. So many retailers sourced from distributors or from brokers and didn't have full visibility all the way back down the chain.
Yeah. So every purchase matters. Why does truly every purchase matter? You've given some examples of how it helped these coffee farmers, right? How, perhaps us purchasing coffee that's fair trade is going to be directly affecting these lives of people that were maybe making 10 cents before. Now they're making $1 or whatever, right? Why does every purchase truly matter?
So unlike, presidential elections, which only happen once every 4 years, companies are looking at demand and looking at our purchasing decisions every day. And they're responding to them. Companies are incredibly responsive to what we buy or don't buy. And so one way to think about it is, our dollars are votes. And we have a chance every time we go to the store to vote with our purchasing decisions by choosing a sustainable product over over a product that isn't. And companies are listening. So the more we buy, the more they will provide. It's as simple as that. So in that sense, every purchase that we make makes a difference. And I want to tell you a story about, concretely, because one way to answer the question is every purchase matters to the companies that we buy our stuff from. They're watching and they're responding. But every purchase also matters to the farmers that grow our coffee and our bananas and our tomatoes. Every purchase matters to the seamstresses who sew our clothes. I visited a farm in Colombia not long ago, and they sell to Sam's Club, which is like a subsidiary of Walmart. Sam's Club is like a competitor to Costco. Have y'all heard of Sam's Club?
Oh, gee. Sam's been around.
Okay.
Yeah.
This farmer's that we visited with one of the farmers in the co-op deep in the mountains of Colombia. His name is Edilberto Acevedo, which is a mouthful. He said, "Call me Eddie."
That accent is on point.
Told you, bro.
I can vouch for that.
So Eddie is a fourth-generation coffee farmer. So his parents, his grandparents, his great-grandparents were coffee farmers. He's 77 years old. He has 3 kids. He has 3 acres of coffee. That's not much coffee. And he was born into a family so poor that when he was 9, after 3rd grade, they took him out of school and put him to work in the family farm. So he knows how to read and write, but he only has a 3rd grade education. And he started work when he was 12, worked like earning wages. And when he was 25, he had enough money saved to buy his first piece of land of his own, 1 acre. And as a young man, he saw other people coming together and forming co-ops. And it seemed to him that he would be stronger if he stood shoulder to shoulder with his neighbors. So he joined the co-op too. And a few years later, they became fair trade certified and they started getting premiums. And with their premiums, they invested in training and learned better agricultural techniques. They learned how to produce organically and they got organic certified. They invested in education, in scholarships. They invested in healthcare programs. We walked his farm, and it is the definition of regenerative agriculture. He didn't know that term, but he had a farm that was not only organic, but that was in harmony with nature, that was conserving soil, that was preserving the forest canopy. It was beautiful. He felt like a partner to me, not like a beneficiary, like someone who was benefiting from my work, but a partner in a common quest to save the planet. He was so savvy about why to plant cover crops and why to do polycropping and all the things. I was so impressed with him, this man with a third grade education who had like the equivalent of a PhD in regenerative agriculture. And toward the end of the visit, he started talking about his kids. 3 kids. 2 of them went through college, thanks to the scholarship fund that the Fair Trade Premium provided. And the third one never really liked school. He was helping his dad on the farm. He's going to inherit the family farm. So when I think about global poverty and the generational cycles of poverty, of generation after generation that's trapped in a cycle of poverty, so much of it is about not having educational opportunity. So the thought that the Fair Trade Premium could enable 2 of his 3 kids to go on to college and to now be professionals working in the nearby town, breaking the cycle of poverty, was just extraordinary and so inspiring to me, and to think that we made that happen through our purchases of fair trade coffee at Sam's Club. I mean, I don't shop at Sam's Club, but some people do. And that's why every purchase matters. With something as simple as a cup of coffee, you can help a farmer send kids through college and disrupt a generational cycle of poverty. It's extraordinary.
That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that story. That's really, really cool. I think that's what really impacts us consumers to be more conscious consumers, because there's probably hundreds and thousands of those stories because of this movement and movements like these. That's really cool. When you were talking about the land and the farming, I just started thinking about some new concepts around quantum farming. Have you looked into any of that stuff? Do you have any insights on that?
Quantum farming?
Yeah.
Sorry, bro.
Okay, cool.
I still got cow shit on my boots.
We'll
I'm still in the
later.
field. Okay.
We'll have a different conversation about that. It gets a little bit more woo-woo, more spiritual, and like connection with the land and how that's helping the land grow. Right. Anyway, it's a different story.
I'm down.
So, Paul, as you step down as CEO after 26 years, you just said you just did that, and you asked for a fuck yes. We'll give you another fuck yeah on that. What is your vision for the future of Fair Trade USA and also for ethical sourcing in general?
Beautiful. So, I mean, I'm very lucky because, my first succession experience was in Nicaragua. I led that co-op for 4 years. I was the only foreigner, white boy, and I was leading the co-op. And so from day one, I was keenly aware of how important it was for Nicaraguans to take over. And my right-hand gal, who worked with me those 4 years, she took over that co-op and proceeded to double sales in 2 years, right? So amazing succession story. And that co-op, by the way, which we started in 1990, is still there 35 years later. I'm so proud of them. And so all these years at Fair Trade, I've dreamt of a similar succession. And my successor, the CEO of Fair Trade USA, is Felipe Arango from Colombia. He was a field auditor for Fair Trade back in the day. So he knows farmers, he knows the standard, he's a content expert, he has this big, beautiful heart, he's brilliant, he's an operator, he's all the things that a proud papa could want in handing off a baby. And I told him when I left, I fully expect you to change everything. And I also fully expect you to make tons of mistakes. Go for it.
I love that.
Right? Because that's how we learn. And so I feel really good. So I stepped out of the org 6 months ago, and I feel great about the trajectory. They're doing great work. And I feel like Fair Trade is poised for even greater scale. So Fair Trade, the Fair Trade certified label has 67% consumer awareness. That's a lot of people. 2,000 great brands and retailers. Over 1 million farmers in 72 countries. Like, there's a certain success and scale already, and I feel like they're at an inflection point where, in some ways, because of Trump and because of the current political discourse, I think people are looking for ways to make a difference, and I know companies are looking for ways to take advantage of the shift in consumer behavior and the shift that we are all part of being more thoughtful about what we buy. Reading the label, wanting to know, is the food that we buy healthy? And how is it impacting the world in social and environmental terms? I mean, that is a macro trend. Gen Z and millennials index particularly high in terms of their expectations of companies. So I don't see the current political environment as a setback for sustainability. If anything, I think it's going to enable it. And so I think fair trade will continue to grow. I mean, here's an example for you. Now, this is last year's numbers, but fresh produce, so fresh fruits and vegetables, that market in the U.S. last year grew by 2%. Fair trade certified fresh produce grew by 25%. Here's another number for you. Apparel sales last year grew by 3.5%. Fair trade certified apparel sales grew by 27%.
Wow.
So, fair trade and things like it, right? Like all the other expressions of ethical sourcing and sustainability, they are growing faster than the market as a whole. So, for me, the question isn't, are things getting better? Will things get better? I am convinced that they will. The question is, what's the pace of change? And is it fast enough?
It's interesting what you bring up because, we're on the west side of LA, a bit of an echo chamber when it comes to, all things better for you in the sense of it, which I love because we're so used to checking labels, right? I mean, I'm check every label at the store, whether it's consumable or something I'm putting on my body. What is it about the Trump administration that you were saying specifically that you think instead of being a setback is actually going to increase that pace? And just speaking outside of where we're at in LA, because I think that this is just already a trend here per se.
Yeah. Well, I think people who are concerned about USAID, for example, being shuttered, right? USAID was the U.S. government agency that was providing foreign aid and assistance and poverty alleviation support to the world, right? It's done. So I think, people who are looking at certain policies and feeling bewildered or feeling opposition can find in ethical sourcing and fair trade and sustainable products an outlet for their energy. Right, in the ethos of every purchase matters, like, and not
Fuel
that
to the fire.
And not that we should give up the public policy debate. I'm not saying that at all. I mean, there's a if we don't like what's going on, then let's take this to the streets. Well, right. Let's raise our voices. Let's do what we can to exercise our democratic right to oppose policies that we don't agree with. Duh, obviously. And let's also recognize that our dollars are votes and companies are listening and change is happening in the corporate world. under the first Trump administration, fair trade sales accelerated. They jumped dramatically. I interpreted that as, okay, people feel alienated over here, so we're going to lean in and we're going to be even greener, if you will, and more responsible and sustainable in our purchases than ever before. We'll see if it happens again, but the point is, the press is full of talk of the powerful people, the politicians, the billionaires, the people that, many of us feel powerless in stopping things that we don't like. And the reality is we have the power. Individually and collectively through our purchasing decisions. We have incredible agency and ability to reward companies, and corporate America is listening.
And we have the power because every purchase matters, and we vote with our dollars.
Right on.
I'm learning well here. Paul, you are incredibly passionate. You're very articulate. You can just tell that you eat, sleep, and breathe all of this, and you speak with just so much heart. As we're closing out here, from a personal standpoint, what has been the most rewarding aspect of this journey for you?
I have a couple answers for that. The first is, I got my start in Nicaragua, so I still have relationships with people that I've known there since like the 80s. And, like my buddy Santiago Rivera, who's a coffee farmer in northern Nicaragua and who I talk about in the book, his daughter, Yolanda, went to high school and then to college thanks to a scholarship fund set up by their Fair Trade Premium. Got a degree in biology, came back and is working in the local health clinic in her community, serving, giving back to her community. And now her daughter just graduated high school, top of her class, and who knows what she'll be. I mean, maybe president of the country. She's so sharp, right? So one of the most rewarding things about being in this movement is seeing generational change, seeing impact. And I love that. And I feel so grateful and so blessed to know so many people who chose to break the mold of generational poverty and to join a movement that helped them on a journey, and that it continues to help them on a journey. So that's one thing. You asked me about conscious capitalism, so I've had the opportunity in this work to meet the CEOs of a lot of companies and to form friendships. Like John Mackey, the co-founder of Whole Foods, who's a dear friend, and we go scuba diving together, and I love John. He's a mentor, he's a friend, he's a conscious capitalist. And John was very skeptical about fair trade early on. And then we went together to visit fair trade rice farmers in Thailand and slept on their floors and visited their farms over a few days. And John had the courage to change his mind. And I've had the privilege of working with a lot of people like that who have had the courage in the business world, who have had the courage to change their minds with regard to sustainability. Because on its face, it looks like, sustainability or profitability. Like there's a trade-off there, right? Like either I can be sustainable or I can maximize profits, but I can't do both. And so the courage and the curiosity and the creativity to engineer a new version of business that brings sustainability and profitability together, that's cool. That's really cool. And I've had not only a front row seat on the emergence of that mentality, but I've been able to befriend and support some of the most powerful business leaders in the U.S. who are kind of slaves to Wall Street and quarterly earnings on the one hand, but then also like really trying to bring their values to work every day. Really trying to like figure it out. Like, is there a better version of business? And that's incredibly inspiring to me. Especially as a former anti-capitalist who basically thought all business people were evil, and to realize, no, there's huge humanity there. There's a tremendous appetite, not just of this generation of business leader, but especially of the one that's coming. Like all the MBA kids, they all want to know about sustainability. They're all thinking about shared value and conscious capitalism. And I just find that deeply inspiring. I mean, what a gift to get to be a part of that.
Absolutely. Well, you had the courage to change your mind as well. So that's clearly an excellent trait for a conscious leader. So we'll close out with, what do you believe are 2 traits that a conscious leader must embody today?
2 traits?
2 traits that a conscious leader must have in today's world.
Curiosity and humility. Curiosity because the current model has to evolve, and we just have to constantly challenge ourselves to challenge our assumptions and challenge our models and experiment and be willing to fail and try a better way that overcomes this trade-off mentality, right? Sustainability versus profitability. No, it's both. It's both. Curiosity and humility in the same vein. The willingness to learn, the willingness to change our minds, the willingness to listen to other stakeholders who we may not agree with, but stop, listen. Again, John Mackey, I got to go back to John because John Mackey at Whole Foods was attacked by the animal rights activists. And John's a vegan, and he cares deeply about the welfare of animals, and yet he was attacked. And it's hard when you're attacked, when you feel like you're doing something right and you're attacked anyway, it's hard not to feel defensive and to feel like, well, no, we're just going to circle the wagons. We know who we are. Like, to hell with them. But that wasn't his approach. His approach, as a humble leader, as a conscious leader, was to invite the activists and the critics in and to listen and to learn and to develop a program that, in the end, they all supported. Pretty cool. Yeah. I'm really lucky. I've got great mentors.
Love that. Well, Paul, you truly are a conscious leader. This is probably the 80th or so interview that I've done, and you're one of the most embodied humans that I've interviewed. Your passion just bleeds through the way you thoughtfully think about the questions, and you take a breath, and you express yourself, and all the things you've done. Congratulations. Truly, you're very inspirational. Definitely, Paul. I'd love to open it up to any questions out here. We'll bring you the mic if you have any questions for Paul.
Hey, Paul. So awesome talk. Really loved hearing it.
Thank you.
Question for you. So going back to the very beginning when we talked about the 10 cents versus $1, I want to ask you, with marketing changing, how do you think brands can take it a step further, like the actual farmers, the manufacturers, the producers? How can they take things a step further in terms of like making their own brand and potentially being able to take more of the profit and having even less middlemen?
Yeah, I love that question. And there are a few examples of companies that are farmers that are doing that. For example, in coffee, there's a coffee brand called Pachamama, which is owned by various fair trade organic co-ops around the world, and they ship their green coffee to their subsidiary here in the U.S. that roasts it, packages it, and sells it into retail. It's small, but it's a cool model. The problem is with retail, it's hard to get on the shelf. And so, Safeway, Ralph's, Whole Foods, Walmart, whoever it is, they tend to give space on shelves to known brands, Pete's and Starbucks and Folgers and the like. And often they will charge what are called slotting fees to let you onto their shelf. So it just presents a barrier for developing world farmer owners of a brand. And I think it's a beautiful development strategy, but there are significant barriers. It's more plausible for U.S. growers. So we work with Driscoll's, for example. And Driscoll's has both its own farms and then it has outgrowers, and they source from and they own the brand. They're very successful, and they're in every store in America. Sun-Kissed Oranges is a co-op, and they've managed to Ocean Spray Cranberries. These brands are owned by farmers, so they've managed to kind of take control of the processing and go all the way to retail. And so there are good examples of it, but in ag in particular, but it tends to be U.S. growers. It's been more challenging for developing world growers, but I think it's an important opportunity. What I'm seeing more of is developing world growers creating brands and selling a value-added product into their own market, right? So Costa Rican farmers roasting their own coffee and selling into Costa Rican grocery stores, and they get more money by doing it that way. It's a good question.
Hi. That was great. Your path was somewhat similar to mine. I've been an activist for decades in sustainability and Co-op America, Green Americas, Lisa Gravis, even Driscoll's. Tamara was head of sustainability for a while. But so for me, what you're talking about, is my language. It's what I've been seeing, and been pushing forward. And I also recognize some of the major challenges in the whole agricultural world. The Department of Ag is one of the most powerful departments in the world. I mean, they have literally, I've seen over decades, the destruction of how they implement change and monoculture into countries all over. It's like, okay, you're going to be the coffee growers, you're going to be this, you're going to be that, But what really, really, really shook my world about the whole food and purchasing was subsidizing. And so I attended the World Trade Organization in Cancun in Mexico in 2004, I think it was. And it was great because it was the Africans that walked out that were African farmers, and that completely collapsed because they said, we're done with subsidizing. Yeah. Because cotton farmers in West Africa, that the labor was so cheap, was undercut by the cotton producers in this United States. The ones here were charging less. So these types of systems, I think, are really important for people to understand that we need to dismantle this, because that's how big corporations and stuff like this have this behind closed doors. Okay, we need to get subsidized because we're having a problem with our cotton, or we're having a problem with our whatever product it is, wheat. So for me, I think what the next stage is that because so many people over decades have said to me, well, it's great fair trade, it's great the organic, but it's more expensive, and going to the farmer's market is more expensive. So it's this dollar thing, and as people get poorer right now with our new administration, because so many things are being cut, that's a counteract. And I agree with you. There is a silver lining where people are waking up and starting to realize. But it's about, for me, now is the time to create these economies like the conscious economy, but decentralize it to a point where they can't do these things anymore. So, yeah. So anyway, so I was just wondering what your thoughts were about that whole situation and how you feel that we should take on that sort of big monster, or the elephant in the room.
Well, I really appreciate that reflection, and there's a lot to unpack there, so we should hang out. But I'm going to pull something out of what you said and address it in a more specific way, and it's actually something that I ask a lot of the people that I interviewed for my book, and it is, who pays for sustainability? And is it necessary that sustainable products cost more? Because if sustainable products by definition are going to cost the consumer more, then obviously the market is reduced to those who can afford it. And, there's rightfully, I think, a discomfort with that sustainable products wouldn't be available to people in all socioeconomic categories and all income levels. And I reflect that debate through these interviews. Some leaders in the business community believe that sustainable products should cost more, that the consumer should pay more for something that has a social or an environmental impact, and that they will pay more. And in fact, that the price of the product is almost like a signal of its authenticity or the authenticity of the claim, right? Like there's data that suggests that we expect an organic banana to cost more than a conventional banana. And if the organic banana is too cheap, we almost question, well, is this really organic? Why is this so cheap, right? So that's a really interesting phenomenon. Again, John Mackey of Whole Foods says sustainable products should cost more because it costs more to produce them. And yeah, that means it's going to be a niche. It might be a big niche, might be 30-40% of the consuming population, but it's not going to be 100%. So that's one point of view. Then there's another point of view. One of my new heroes is a CEO named Tarang Amin. He's the CEO of a beauty company called Elf Beauty. Do y'all know Elf? Right? Second largest beauty company in America, cosmetics, sunscreen, all this stuff. They launched fair trade 3 years ago, and in 3 years they've gone to 85% fair trade across all their products, which is amazing. And what that means is that the factory workers that are making those products are getting better wages, getting a fair trade premium, all the things. And Elf converted these supply chains, these factories, to fair trade and pay the fair trade premium, and they didn't mark up the price. The price to the consumer, and the sweet spot of their market is like Target and CVS. Like they have high quality, affordable cosmetics, and they chose to internalize that fair trade premium. And so I asked Tarang for the book. I said, okay, well, what does that mean? If you're paying the workers more and not charging the consumer more, does that mean you're taking up a hit in terms of your profit margin, right? Who pays for sustainability? Does that mean you and your shareholders are paying for it? And he said, no, that's the wrong way to think about it, because fair trade is strengthening our brand, which is driving our growth. We just had, I think, 40 consecutive quarters of dramatic growth. And so when you look at profitability and margin from a growth perspective, he said our profit margins are healthier than they have ever been. And so I don't know. It's like these CEOs are mad scientists in a laboratory where they're trying to cook up a better version of capitalism. And it's messy, and it's not always successful, and some are trying, pricing up the product, and others are internalizing it and being successful. And that's what gives me hope. When I zoom in, I feel discouraged and angry about the slow pace of change. Like, what the hell? These companies need to just do the right thing. As Greta said, the world's on fire, so step up. But when I zoom out, and I look at the trajectory of progress, and I look at all these mad scientists in the laboratory of capitalism trying to do better in a way that's good for the planet, and it has to be good for the company. There has to be a business case. Otherwise, it's just charity, and that's not going to scale. I feel hopeful. And I feel optimistic, actually.
Love that. That was a great question. And yeah, great analysis. And really, there's actually a ton of data out there that's showing that businesses doing the right thing and doing the conscious thing is actually making them more money. So it's actually good for business in the end. So that's definitely the best way to look at it, too. We'll do one more question, and then we'll do any other questions for afterwards. Yes, young lady at the front.
Hi, thank you so much. I would love to hear more about what you look at within terms of sustainability within fair trade. If I understand correctly, it's about 30% of what you look at. But how do you define sustainability? And how do you project that into fair trade?
So when I think of sustainability, I think of it in all its dimensions, so social, environmental, and economic. I think a lot of people, when they say sustainability, they mean environmental sustainability. I think of it as the more holistic, well-rounded concept. Arguably, we've had more progress with environmental sustainability over the last 30 years than we have with the social, and I often feel like fair trade addresses the social side of sustainability in a way that a lot of companies haven't. When we started working with Walmart, for example, they were very proud of the fact that they had ordered all their truck drivers to turn off the trucks when they were loading and unloading. Super simple, but that reduced emissions incredibly.
Wow.
And oh, by the way, saved them a boatload of money. And so my perspective is that environmental sustainability kind of went first, in part because there were opportunities to save money by reducing packaging, by reducing waste, by turning off the engines, that kind of stuff. The social side of sustainability is a little different, though, isn't it? Because the main goal of social sustainability is living wage, y'all. And that means more money. So the social side of sustainability has lagged, in my view, because it's not as clear how a company will save money or how it will make that work from a financial perspective. So I think fair trade is grappling, and all versions of sustainability labels and companies are grappling with that. To your point, in the fair trade standard, our 200-point checklist that I reference of social and environmental criteria, about a third are environmental. And that's not a gratuitous concession. It's actually, I believe, a recognition that people and planet go together. Like, you can't really save the people if you don't save the planet. You can't really save the planet unless you save the people. Like, it goes together. Ask any Colombian coffee farmer. The key to being able to sustain livelihood, income for the family, is to make sure that the forest canopy is preserved, right? Because the coffee grows better and is more productive under the canopy. So environmental and social go together. It's a natural fit. And so the fair trade criteria around the environment in ag have to do with requirements for how farmers steward the land, how they steward the soil, protection of forests, protection of groundwater, a long list of chemicals. We were talking about this earlier, a long list of chemicals that you can go and buy at Home Depot, like Roundup. Fair trade farmers aren't allowed to use Roundup. That's a highly toxic, highly carcinogenic herbicide. You spray it to kill weeds. You can get it at Home Depot, but you can't use it on a fair trade farm. So we have a long list of toxic chemicals which are not allowed. And then, in addition, I would say this is part of fair trade's approach to the environment. We created a premium for farmers that went the extra mile and got certified organic. So it's not a requirement that fair trade farms go organic, but there is a financial reward if you go the extra mile. And so today, out of 1.2 million farmers that we work with in 73 countries around the world, roughly 70% are certified organic. So typically you'll see like organic and fair trade labels side by side, which I love. Like I worked with organic coffee farmers in Nicaragua, and I only eat organic fruits and vegetables. I don't want pesticides on my food. Come on. So we chose not to make that mandatory because we wanted to accommodate farmers that did use fertilizer, but I see real progress there in terms of the evolution. One more thing on this issue of environmental sustainability in fair trade. I think the climate anxiety that we all feel and that Gen Z feels in particular is inviting fair trade and things like it to be more explicitly impactful on the environment and on climate. I mean, if we did a survey of everyone in the room, I don't reckon that all y'all would say, oh yeah, fair trade is a climate-friendly label. Like, most people associate fair trade with like fair wages and a better deal for farmers and workers, right? For us to be relevant, not only to consumers and what consumers care about, but also to the future of farming, maybe we need to strengthen the climate side of our standard, either in terms of how the requirements are set or in terms of how the rewards are set. Maybe it's not a requirement, maybe it's an added premium for farmers that go from conventional to organic and from organic to regenerative. I'm just brainstorming here. I don't run the organization anymore, so it's not my call, but I feel like if fair trade has been 70-30 social environmental until now, maybe in the future that mix will evolve in a way that meets the needs of all stakeholders, whether it's consumers or farmers and everyone in between. Thanks for the question.
That was a great question. Well, I learned a ton tonight. And thank you again, Paul. You're doing some amazing stuff.
Thank you,
and
Sebastian.
Thanks for inspiring us all. Thanks again, Paul. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you like the show, please subscribe or share with a homie. It means the world to me. And honestly, straight up, just hit me up. The easiest way on Instagram, SEBNAUM. Ask me questions. I want to be here as a resource and a source of inspiration. I hope you have a beautiful rest of the day. Much love.